I appreciate it. Well, let's go ahead and I'll click through the presentation, and we'll figure all this out as we go along. You know, we're all designers. We're used to iterating as we go. So let's take a look. This is what I've got presented so far. Okay. The premise of these webinars is that number one, the IGDA is an all-volunteer organization, and the whole purpose of this is for those of us who are game developers to get together and help each other to be, you know, better and more productive and just, you know, move forward. So that's the whole point of the IGDA, and I've known Tom Descalia for a long time, and he's really keen on you know, getting the IGDA to do these kinds of things. So with this premise of the webinars is we'll be able to provide a forum where every week there's a different topic, a different discipline will get together, have their people from around the globe gather and talk about topics of interest. So that's sort of the basic premise of this. Okay, let's see. So, blah, 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 blah. As game design, we get to have the third Wednesday of every month that we're going to be talking about. So it's moderated, every webinar is moderated by a topic nanny. I'm the topic nanny so far for the game design thing. I am not interested in turning this into the Chris show. I really want to have lots of voices in here, and I'm here to facilitate the discussion and to sort of deal with a lot of the back-end stuff and make things happen. So I really want this to be things that the community comes forward with and proposes and runs with. Okay, so this is live. I am recording it though, so theoretically the video of this is going to be available from the IGDA website when we're done. So that'll be, I'm the first one to remember to hit the record button, so we'll see how that turns out. This is all new territory for us. Okay, so you're saying, okay, so who's this guy? My name is Chris Crowell. I have my own consulting, game design, creative direction company, Crowell Interactive. I've been making video games and computer games of all kinds since 1994. I was formerly a director. I was on the board of directors of the IGDA, which is where I met Tom and a number of the other people. I was a co-founder of the Positive Impact GameSig. My personal passion is using games to make the world a better place. And I'm rumored to live in a tree. As you can see, you know, there's a photo of me, you know, just outside my native habitat there. All right. So enough about me. Let's get on to what we're doing. So I can see, you know, the questions that are being posted here, and so I want to try to turn this into a discussion about things. And the first thing that came to mind is, you know, being an experienced game developer, I want to do pre-production on what this whole thing is going to be, right? Like, how do we want to go forward with this? So I'm really keen, since you guys are the excited, you know, torchbearers for this first session. What would you like to see this webinar series turn into? I want to make sure that this is what people want, right? So I was compiling a list of possible topics that we could have that we could talk about, and you know, there's a level of detail, there's a level of expertise. I don't know whether it's useful for people to really kind of do any, you know, some sort of game design 101, really fundamental things, or whether people have very specific, you know, detail-oriented kinds of quandaries that are of interest to a significant number of people. You know, would you prefer to have a single expert come in and give a presentation, or would you like to see a panel discussion of people who are sort of, you know, debating things and just kind of an extended Q&A? The thing that I was considering as sort of the basic template was to have a topic every session that we can explore, and I'll get into that next. sort of have a topic, do an initial presentation on that of maybe 10 or 15 minutes, sort of like the way I'm going through the presentation here, talk to that, explain some concepts, bring up, sort of what we want the conversation to be about, and then to have a panel with a few other senior designers on it. And then we finish the presentation, and the designers, the panel will then have a discussion to talk about things that were brought up in the presentation, sort of give their opinions and experiences on the content, and then open it up to just a full-on Q&A where people who are in the audience can, post the questions and have the panelists respond. So that's sort of my basic template for what I think would be useful based on what I've seen, at GDC and other get-togethers. Okay. So what do you mean with postmortems? So, okay. Thanks a lot, Juan. And let me know if I'm talking too quickly also. Showcase and discussion with real game created with suggestions. Okay. So just to answer the question, a postmortem is a discussion about what went right and what went wrong with a game project after the project is shipped. So I've worked on, I think, 15 different titles now. So I definitely have opinions on what went right and what went wrong on any one of those kinds of things, and it's from my viewpoint. So I find those to be really helpful, right? Because that's actual true experience talking about what can happen, and this is, I think that's one of the powerful things we can get out of this is to see what experiences other people have had, share those things, and then we can all sort of learn on how to avoid the bad things and try to do more of the good things. Okay. Oh, Kickstarter game postmortem would be really good. Okay, that's a great idea. Okay, so there's I'll have a how to contact me page, and it's good to start out with a game development 101. Okay, great. Okay, so what I wanted to do with this first session is to present. The next slide is going to be just a whole bunch of different kinds of topics and things that we can do on for the sessions. So what I wanted to do, since we have these once a month, was let's sort of see what people want to do, kind of get a top 10 out of this kind of big list I've compiled. I'll throw in some more that people suggest, and then we'll choose the top 3, and those will be sort of like, that'll be what our focus is for the upcoming 3 sessions that we have. And then I think after that we'll probably have learned a lot about what we like and what we don't like, and we'll kind of open it up again and see if we want to keep continuing in that vein, and kind of vote on, well, what's the next top 3 that we want to do. Game audio music, that's a great idea. I've always find that audio is sort of the last thing that people think of. So all right, I'm just going to have to take some notes here on the side because my presentation program gets a little funky if I start changing things around. But this is sort of just kind of the things that we've got here. So I'm just, I'm going to go ahead and type in the stuff that's coming up here. So audio music, player agency, yep. Yeah, I have something along those. Okay, so in the upper right-hand corner, which I'm not sure you can see kind of right there, under storytelling, I've got pre-authored versus emergent, show, tell, or play, right? That's kind of, to me, that's longhand really for the player agency. So I think I got that covered. Let's take a look here. All documented. Okay, great. Oh, I didn't change my, because I'm a goober. Let me change this real quick. Okay, there I actually changed my name. All right, top 3, new user experience, cost-effective design iteration, hardcore versus casual. Okay, yeah. Oh, that's good. see if that, oh, that's not it. All right. All right, a new user experience is a very good topic to cover. There's a concept that I'm kind of delving into and trying to develop a presentation about, which is sort of the phases of a game that a player will go through, and this actually works for a board game or a video game or any of these other kinds of things, right? And so you sort of have that initial new user experience, and then you kind of know what you need to know to get in and play the game. So you have this sort of big, big, long or not so long gameplay session where you're going on, and then you kind of reach the end game, right, where someone is about ready to win the game, and ideally nobody is quite out of the game at that point, right? Like, it's still anybody could win, but there's definitely a winner, a winner who's poised to win, right? And so the game typically shifts at that point and goes goes into overdrive. And then there's potentially a fourth phase, which is the post game, which I consider to be the meta game, which is when the players talk about what that game experience was, right? And in a crappy game, there's a meta game where everybody talks about how awful it was, right? And ideally there's a good meta game where people can talk about what the strategies were, what they were trying to do at the time. And to me, that's a lot of the fun of playing the game, is that sort of after the game. And this could be for your New Year's Day football game, or when you all sat together on the couch and you're playing Halo, or you're playing Civilization, or you were in World of Warcraft or whatever, right? Like, all games kind of have that kind of a thing going on. Okay, Pokemon works at a massive level because of this impressive post game. Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's Pokemon's got, like, this huge metagame around it that is really interesting. And anyway, I think that's worth a whole discussion on there. Okay, maybe it's related to hardcore versus casual. I think difficulty is a core value on the gameplay. Could be great. Yeah, I agree. That is definitely one of the key metrics to me of what makes the game hardcore versus casual, is that that the steepness of the learning curve, the windows of success that you have, the penalty for failure, all those kinds of things, and that's all about I think talking about the different the hardcore versus casual. All right. So as I was putting this together and I was thinking about this, I wondered if there was like a way that I could use SurveyMonkey to maybe allow people to grade all these different kinds of topics. Is that something that would be useful? Because I think I can put it on the web page. Stephen writes, in the old days, hardcore versus casual used to mean whether or not you read the instruction manual before playing the game. Yeah, that was in the days when we actually still had an instruction manual. I think everything is now in the game, right? Because the print costs are making things a little out of whack. Let's see what's going on here. I've got something. Yeah. Okay. So I would really love to sort of see, feel free to chime in, guys, and write about, what you think there. I'm recording all this stuff, so I'll be able to go back and pick up your thoughts off of the whole question thing here. I'll correlate it. I had been thinking that maybe I could just kind of grab these things and, sift them physically on the screen, but that's beyond my technical level right now. This is not gonna handle that very well. So go ahead and throw some more suggestions out there and see what you want to do. I wonder if there's a way where I could make everybody see everybody's comments. I'm sorry, I'm just getting used to the dashboard here, so I'm not a power user yet. Hopefully by the third or fourth thing. Okay. All right. Stephen writes, now just imagine what would happen if you make digital instruction manuals and require the modern audience to go through them. Digital feelies, if you will. Yeah. Early visual development, concept art. Yeah, there's a whole kind of, all these little yellow cards I have up here are about sort of that documentation phase. One of the things I'm very annoyed at is that as a game designer, our tools to work with are kind of all over the place, right? Like, I don't know about you, but I spend an immense amount of my time in Excel, which is not exactly the most kind of creative environment. But there's mind mapping tools. There's, I actually use PowerPoint a fair amount now to sort of as my kind of ongoing idea sketch pad, because I can easily start up a new a new slide. I can pull graphics down. I can just kind of type things in there, pull little arrows back and forth, kind of flip the page and go to a new page. So I think that's worth having a conversation about in terms of what are the elements that should be in each one of these things? What are the kinds of things that you're trying to accomplish with the different kinds of documentation? What's some success stories of, a best way to get around it? Programmers have these really great programming tools. Let's see here. Speaking of manuals, here's a manual for the GoToWebinar dashboard. And I did not read it. Smarty pants. Thank you, Stephen. I'm the kind of guy, I'm old school, I get in, I play it for a while, and then if I really feel like I need the instruction manual. Stephen, would you like me to unmute you? Do you have a microphone handy? Let's see. All right, you seem like a chatty fellow. Let's turn you on and give the world the benefit of your voice. Welcome.
Thank you.
Certainly.
I figured best way to figure out how to make it so that everyone can see what everyone else is saying. Where else can you find out but the GoToWebinar user dashboard user manual?
You are a good man.
Figured it'd help.
I'm going to make you a panelist.
Oh, thank you.
Bam. That's how this works. You will be punished for being useful.
Not sure what. Well, I just try.
No, I appreciate that. Okay, so there you are. So yeah, what do we have a way to make everybody's written comments? Do you know?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure, but I'm actually going through the manual and see what I can find out now.
That's great. Let's gamify the webinar. Yes, absolutely. So so for myself, I've been making games for about 20 years. And I've really recently decided that I'm not going to do regular games anymore because I sort of feel like I've been there and done that. And I'm moving into the gamification sector, and specifically I'm looking to do educational games, right? To work with a classroom curriculum and figure out how to make that really engaging and make that work with classroom teaching. So there's a game side of it, and there's a classroom side of it, and all of those kinds of things. And that falls under the whole kind of giant spectrum of gamification, which I thought I had here somewhere, but I think maybe it fell by the wayside. How many people are interested in having a session about gamification? Okay. Great. Let me, I'm going to put that in the permanent notes. Okay, great. So that's something that I actually know a bit about, and I have a guy, sometimes it's really a whole new world. You're absolutely right, Juan. So Juan says, here, he waves his hand, I've been working as a consultant on that for some time, and it's really a whole new world. It is and it isn't. It certainly opens up a huge spectrum of possibility for us as game designers, and it's nice that other sort of non-game entertainment industries are beginning to understand the power that games have to kind of reach out and grab people. But I find that we're using, like we still use a lot of the same considerations, or we should be using the same considerations that we would have when we're working with a brand. So for instance, I've worked on open season games, Kung Fu Panda games, Indiana Jones games, and there's always, in my experience, always a lot of pressure to put things in the game, and this pressure comes from a lot of different angles, put things in the game that don't really make sense to the brand. And I think that's something that we as game designers that's a real value that we can bring to any kind of a gamification process, right? I mean, just kind of figuring out points and developing a leaderboard is not, you know, that's kind of a low-hanging fruit, but to sort of introduce things to the experience that make sense with that brand or with that school curriculum or with the training program or whatever it is that you're trying to do, integrating the gameplay with what it is that the client is trying to communicate takes the expertise of game design to effectively, you know, bring those things together, right? And that's I think that's a great topic to explore. Okay, so shall I just go through these things and let people kind of respond and see what triggers something? So let me just I'll kind of touch on these things and say, all right, so documentation. I know that I've talked to other game designers, and I've worked with a lot of different kinds of documentation systems. I have my own fairly strong opinions on those things. Is that an ongoing problem that you feel would warrant a session? And if you just put a number in there from like 1 to 10, where you would put that on your top 10, or you know, what's your ranking of just kind of discussing approaches and methodologies for documentation? Is that a concern that you have? So just go ahead and type that in there. 7, okay. 5, yeah, it's not sexy, that's for sure. Okay, so cool, that's great. So it's like, all right, it's interesting, yeah. Okay, so when I'm talking about like the documentation, I'm talking about being able to, you know, communicate our design ideas to all kinds of different audiences, right? Because yeah, documentation is needed, but it's not the fun part. I have seen projects really have a hard time because the documentation didn't do the job of communication, right? Because the designer wrote it maybe for themselves, which I think is always kind of a big problem. You know, knowing who your audience is, right? When if you're going to put together a PowerPoint pitch to the money people, that's a very different kind of a communication covering different points than if you're trying to explain a feature to a programmer and what you expect that gameplay experience to turn out like, right? Like the programmer's going to have certain things that they're interested in. The art guy's going to have certain things there we are. Yeah. So I don't know. To me, I'm only sort of defending that because it's you know, it's kind of fundamental, because as designers we're at the center of everything, and we're kind of the air traffic controller in a lot of cases to sort of make sure that all the pieces fit. So our communication skills are the most critical of probably anybody on the team. So I don't know. I felt that might be an interesting thing to explore, but that's fine. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, so let's. I don't want to turn into just the whole thing about documentation. I just want to kind of touch on each one of these things here.
That will likely be a topic for another webinar.
Yeah. So I'm just seeing like where it falls on the scale of things that we could be talking about. Okay. How about cameras? sort of, the field of view for the game. Choice of camera is one of those fundamental pillars that the whole game is going to hinge on. I mean, it's definitely a huge choice that that can make or break the game, and changing it later on can have a huge impact. Is that something we're talking about? Just go ahead and give me some. Okay, just go ahead and give me some numbers. So I got a 10, 7. Okay, if I have to vote, I'd give it a 10. Okay, I think maybe that's because people understand that it's important, but it's not necessarily a top thing. Maybe everybody kind of already gets that. Okay, how about monetizing? I know this is something that's definitely hitting a lot of people. Oh, 10s. People aren't crazy about the monetizing? Is that because it's not fun, or because you find you have a handle on it?
If I may add in, I think the thing with monetization is that it's kind of a very tricky balancing act. You've got the common community that has, of game players who look at monetizations as some sort of evil boogeyman. And at the same time, you've got developers who see monetization as something that's almost like a necessary evil to survive in the modern game market. And the tricky part that I find that's really the biggest problem is you have to sort of find a way to come to that balance of, monetization in order to stay afloat, and monetization because you're trying to, I guess, take sort of the gambling process where you're trying to, like, I believe there have been studies on like Candy Crush Saga that equate the kind of draw that it pulls people in. It pulls them in through the sort of same way that casinos draw people in. A lot of flashy lights, a lot of music, and basically make people feel good about losing money. But at the same time, you have to try and also, if you're making a game, you can't just make it another casino type game. You have to make it something that's actually fun. And if you're going to put some sort of monetization feature into your game, the way I see it is you have to find that sort of happy balance of something that's acceptable to the game players and acceptable to the game developers so that both sides are happy. And if you can pull that off, then that way everyone wins.
Right.
The tricky part is finding it.
So there's definitely a lot to talk about there. So we'll, I'll mark that as a definite maybe. Okay. It feels like people are okay. So that's moved up a little bit. So that's good. Let me go in here. I'm going to, let me pop this out here. I'm going to go back in here. All right. So this guy is going to get promoted. All right, I'm breaking the fourth wall. Look at this. This is just crazy. All right. Let's see. Everybody's seeing that, right, when I'm moving the things around. So I'll just go ahead and promote those things up there when we have something that's awesome. Okay. All right, let's take a look then. All right, so artificial intelligence. So I worked on The Sims, and I worked on SimCity, and I've worked with, in some racing games where we did, the other cars, right? The NPC cars were driven by an AI. So I definitely have some thoughts about it. We've got a guy who runs an AI webinar, but I believe that's aimed primarily at programmers. So how do you guys feel about that sort of artificial intelligence as a topic for game designers? And I could probably go ahead and do it. So.
Well, if you ask me, I think there's sort of two ways you can look at it. You've got the technical perspective and the design perspective.
Right.
The technical perspective would be how you do it,
right.
Whereas the design perspective is what can you do with it.
Right. Yes. Well, I know that when I've worked with the AI guys, like you need to tell them what you want, what your expectations are, and the more that you know, by talking, collaborating with your programmer, and they can tell you, all right, this is doable, that's not doable, maybe you want to do it this way, those kinds of things. Anyway, there's okay, so it feels like artificial intelligence is definitely a topic that people would like to see. So, okay, so let's go in there. As you know, you managed to make it more complex. But it makes, yes. So Juan says, if you know a lot about it, you could manage to make more complex mechanics that make the game richer. Absolutely. I love finding out about pretty much all of the technical stuff in the game because that just lets me be a power user. And one of my stated goals when I get on a game project is to surprise the lead engineer by doing something with their game engine that they don't think it could do. I had the good fortune to sort of pull that off on the first game that I ever worked on, and I just kind of worked a little scripting hack in there to do something that he told me I couldn't have at all. And so that was a real pleasurable moment for me. And his response was great because he says, "Oh, look how smart I am! What a great engine I have! It will do things even that it's not supposed to do." So that it was just kind of a fun thing for all of us. Okay, let's try this now. So games for kids. Send all. I'm going to put that there so I've got a topic heading, I think. I'm trying to get these numbers matched up. Okay, so games for kids, 1, 8, so some yes, some no, feels like, kind of 8, no. Okay, that's a maybe. So for the people who are into it, that's a very strong interest. And yeah, Stephen, you can jump in, right? If you've got something to say, don't wait for me to ask you. I made you panelist because you seem to have thoughts on things.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, good. Sure.
Well, with games for kids, that's something that's I consider as an important subject because one of the things that there's like two things that I think are important when it comes to that. One, sometimes you're making a game and you think I want to reach a huge audience. But at the same time, I'm sure there's going to be game designers out there who want to make, some kind of very rich story, mature story, or some kind of, deep involved thing.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's not really the kind of thing that would be, I guess you could say, kid-friendly. So you sort of try, if that's not what you're thinking, not what you're concerned about, that's fine. But at the same time, there's one other thing that I think is also worth one, how can you make a game that doesn't compromise your original design but still be able to reach a nice wide audience? And two, how to make games for kids better so that people don't look at it and go, oh, you got another SpongeBob game? Why did you do that?
Well, but it in particular, right, because I kind of think that's true for all kinds of games, right, in terms of like, why did you make that kind of a thing? But having worked on games for kids, there's the ESRB ratings. There is the COPA compliance, right, where the kids can't communicate with each other to the point where they can, give out any kind of personal information. There's a lot more regulations and considerations. I mean, when you're making games for kids, it's a subset of all games for sure, and it's worth, I don't know, to me, I know, so it seems like some people are doing it, so I kind of got that in sort of the second tier of priority. Some people are very interested in this, and some of the designers are not, that's not what they're going to be doing. So maybe this will be a fourth or fifth game session thing, or game design session that we do, and then the people who are really into the kids games would be able to come to that and like it. So first, for the top 3, I'm really looking for stuff that isn't there a card for audience target? No, I don't have that. So, yeah, so maybe it's, okay. So Juan Sebastian says, shouldn't there be a card for, you know, identifying your target audience and designing for that? Let me just write that up. Designing for a target audience. Identifying and like that kind of a thing. Okay. So how do people feel about that as a topic? You know, sort of how do you go about identifying, you know, like doing kind of the marketing side of it to say, here's my market research, the kinds of things that the people that I'm making this game for are typically interested in are this and this and this and this and this. So would there be a subset for an ongoing, you know, I think that you're, so the, I'm sorry, okay. So good, I got a 1 in terms of like this designing for a target audience. So Brian says, I like that topic, but would there be a subset for an ongoing game and analytics?
I have a very good example of why that's an important thing to discuss about.
Sure.
How familiar are you with the Tomodachi Life debacle?
Somewhat. That was a long time ago.
No, it was only about a couple of weeks ago.
What? Okay, so this is a whole new one. I'm not familiar with this one at all.
Okay.
Tomodachi goes back a long time.
No, not Tamagotchi, Tomodachi.
Oh,
Tomodachi. Nope. This is a Nintendo game for a Nintendo 3DS that's coming out. Mm-hmm. And Nintendo made the conscious, you know, it's basically you take your Nintendo Wii character and it's sort of sim-ish, I guess you could say, where you've got characters that can do all kinds of crazy things in their own little virtual town and lifestyle, including one of the options is to get into a relationship. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that Nintendo made the conscious decision not to include in that game was same-sex relationships.
Oh, right. Okay. I did hear about this, yeah.
And, you know, you've got Tomodachi Life, which is going to be an E for everyone kind of game. You know, this is going to be a game that people are going to, you know, their kids are going to play and so on. So at the same time, when you start thinking about it, you know, when you were working on The Sims, you know, The Sims allowed for same-sex relationships in that game, but you know, it's still a very family-friendly game. You know, it's one that, you know, everyone knew and everyone knows. Yep. So the point is, do you ever encounter any obstacles from any, you know, like the ESRB? Like, would they consider same-sex relationships a factor when grading the game? When
That's a good question. You know, I don't know. I don't remember whether we did or not. You know what we had in there is we had this mechanism. I know we talked about it, and we had this ability to create these relationships. You know, and it's driven by you know, just variables within each character, and it was just actually, you know, it's an extra line of script to say this is, you know, check and this is only valid for opposite gender, right? So it was actually more work to make it not work, and so we thought, well, plus, you know, we were in Northern California, Bay Area, right? So it was like, yeah, sure, let's just have that in there, and we'll see what happens. And you know, the whole point of The Sims was to really make it as kind of open sandbox as possible. And this is something that I think is really important, and maybe this is worthy of a topic to say, like, what are your like what is your game about? What are the fundamentals? What are the goals? What are the parameters that define what your game is going to be like? And so for The Sims, it was, it's these little people. They can't be too competent. And to let the player just have this really, really wild open sandbox. And that's one of the huge parts of the delight of the game, is just trying things out. And like in other games, they would have not let you do that stuff, right? Like pull the ladder out of the pool and then just let the sim swim around until he drowns, right? It's just, we just left that in deliberately because of the design philosophy to let the player do what they wanted to do, right? It wasn't, there's no goal that says drown one of your sims, right? So that's a thing that, but the player could choose to do that if they wanted to. And so, part of it, so a lot of what the ESRB rating is about is what is the game asking you to do, as opposed to, well, if you abuse the game or, find these edge cases where you can do things, can you accidentally create a situation, or does it look like it was sort of predefined and you just discovered it, right? So that's sort of the difference between sort of emerging gameplay or discovering an Easter egg. An Easter egg would be, something that was predefined that the player just, by exploring around and trying things or putting in a cheat code or something, can uncover this predefined piece of gameplay. So, do I have?
That's true. And
go ahead.
I definitely recommend looking up the Tomodachi Life situation, because the order of events was, and the game was actually originally released in Japan in 2009, or no, not 2009, 2012, I think. I forgot off the top of my head, but it's been out in Japan for a few years. And when it first came out, same-sex relationships were possible, but it was possible because of a bug in the game that would break it as well. So when they patched it to remove that bug, they removed the option for same-sex relationships as well, which led to a hashtag on Twitter called MeQuality. That's M-I-I. I'll actually type it in there.
Oh, sure.
You can share it.
Yep.
The hashtag was MeQuality, just like that, where basically someone started a petition for Nintendo to say, hey, I know, please, can you put this back in the game? And Nintendo said no. And they released 2 press releases. The first one seemed very, I read that press release to my wife. She had no idea about the whole situation at all. I just read what the press release said. And even without knowing anything about the game or the whole surrounding situation, she heard that press release and goes, did they really write that? And then they released a second press release afterwards, and I also read that to her, and she said, why didn't they release that one first? That one's much better. And so now there's a big storm about, people in, the LGBT community who are, up in arms. Some are pretty offended by it because they feel like Nintendo's purposely excluding them. And I know some people who are, LGBT people who are also game developers who go, from a technical standpoint, it's not that hard to include it in the game.
Okay.
So that there, I think, is something that's definitely a worthy topic of discussion.
Okay. Can you quantify that in a card level summation that I can put up here?
Let me see.
Oh, community
I'll
managers.
type it out in
That's
order to help make it easier.
Sure, thanks. Okay. Okay, Juan, no problem. I'll turn you back off so nothing bad happens. All right, and go back in here. So designing sandbox, does that, how about discussion for releasing a game as early access and design challenges that follow? Adam says, what about a discussion about releasing a game as early access and design challenges that will follow? Can you tell me what do you mean when you say releasing a game as early access? Here, I'll turn your mic on, Adam, so you can not have to type it all out. There you go. Oh, Adam doesn't have a mic. Okay. No problem. So go ahead and type it, and I will read it out to everybody. And of course, if there's anybody with a mic who would like to get in on and chime in on the conversation, you're welcome to let me know. Okay. Sorry for my loud keyboard. I've been told it's very loud. Send all, boom, boom, boom. Let's see if that works.
Here's a little tip I've always found when it comes to when you're presenting or got your mic on, is that typically if you're not talking, I typically mute myself in order to prevent any nearby sounds like keyboards typing,
right,
or whatnot. Don't bother everyone in the room.
Yeah.
Because I know that can get pretty aggravating. But by simply just making sure to mute yourself when you're done talking, that way you can help avoid that.
When I'm doing raids and things, I work on a push to talk, but it's I already, in talking with the guys ahead of time before I hit the go online button, I was forgetting to unmute myself, and then I start rambling on, and that's like the second thing that goes when you get old, right? It's forgetting to unmute yourself. Oh, I don't know about voice activation. I didn't look into that. Like I have to read the manual afterwards. That would be a good idea. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so let's see. Can you all vote on designing for sandbox? Bam. 4, okay, 4, 4, 3, 4, 4, 4. Okay, so it's kind of the middle there. It's not like a bunch of ones. So that's cool. All right, I just want to, since the main thing I wanted to do here was kind of go through and talk about these things, is there anything else? Okay, hey, Brian says a 1 for that. Okay, cool. Let's see. Let me just kind of touch on these things. And so if somebody sees something that they like on this list of cards on the screen here, just go ahead and kind of type in the name and a number next to it about, 1 being, yeah, I want this at the top of the list, and 10 being, yeah, it's, not really that interested in it. Well, you'll just put the stuff up that you think is really awesome, that you would love to see sessions about, that you think would be the most helpful to you. Elements of user interface, okay, definitely. A quest 1, okay. Storytelling, good. Yep, storytelling 1, all right. Okay. This is, I'm sorry, I should have thought of this in the first place and just do it this way. It only, oh well, we live and learn. Okay, so user interface is good. Oh, prototyping, that's a great idea. Okay, prototyping, I'm going to put that in here as a card just because it absolutely should be there. That is a great topic And that might even be, yeah, further up. I'll just put that up there. I don't know. How on earth did I forget that? Okay. Game hardcore. Okay, great. Thanks, Marcelo. Also, the idea of people now releasing alpha builds as the new form of betas, and betas being the new form of finished games. You know, that is really interesting. Johnny writes, the idea of games now sort of putting out an alpha build and calling it beta, and then fixing the bugs to the point where they can call, what's actually a beta build, calling it the final, and then knowing that they're just going to be continuing to push out more, more updates as they go along. Interesting thought. Decision making. Okay. Go ahead.
I can just think of various reasons where that can be a bad thing. Where if you release a beta as a supposed quote-unquote final build with the intention of hopefully updating and patching it later, what eventually could happen is you find yourself releasing a broken product that you eventually, for whatever reason, it's like you intend for it to get fixed, but it never does.
Well, and I think that's kind of the key, right? Is that what are the criteria that you would use to make that decision? Sort of like PlayStation Home being an infinite beta. You are correct, right? So there's an interesting design challenge for what used to be the dominant paradigm, right, when I started, was that we would end up with a gold master and we would burn a disc, or, God forbid, back in the days we had cartridges. That was it, right? Like, it had better bloody work when it was done. And now with everything is at least touching an online component, so you know that you can push out updates. And so what does that mean for the design side of things? How does that affect your decision-making process, or how are you going to process features? I know it's definitely changed things for me, right? Because now you know that, we used to have the second sheet where, second tab in the spreadsheet where we would move things. It's like, well, that'll go in the sequel, right? Now you can say, well, that's going to go out in the update, or it's going to do things there. So that's an interesting topic to talk about.
And I can think of two very good examples of, on polar opposite ends. I remember reading about there was a Batman game. It wasn't, part of the whole Batman Arkham thing. Was not made by the original Batman Arkham developers, Rocksteady. But I remember that they released a game. There was a game-breaking bug. I think actually a couple game-breaking bugs that people kept demanding, hey, you need to patch this. Hey, this needs to be fixed. And they told the community, no, we're not touching it.
Okay.
They said they're not going to fix it, and so they've released what is essentially a high-end, upper-level AAA or A or AA or what have you, game title that's broken. And then you've got, if you compare it to, say, another philosophy, and I'm going to pull in one of my, specialties I'm trying to learn more about, and in my pipe dream, hopefully get.
Hi, I muted myself by accident. There we go.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yeah. Okay.
I was gonna say with Nintendo, like one of the things I keep thinking about why first-party Nintendo games do so well is because they don't do that philosophy. They still, in this day and age, mostly follow a gold master copy disc philosophy. So when a game's released, it's as shiny and polished and finished as possible. And I think there's sort of a dichotomy where you've got the balance of wanting to release a nice, finished, shiny, polished copy, and the desire to get something out there because you want your audiences to be able to play something, and so you can start making income, which might be necessary to make that nice gold master shiny copy in the end.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I think that's a really good discussion there.
Okay. How to make hard decisions. How's that? Cutting features, when to release, things like that? Does that sort of summarize the topic properly? I managed to lose my window where I was seeing. Oh, here we are. No, it went over there. Okay, great. Sorry, I'm being a total noob with this user interface. Okay, theory, gameplay, game during my package versus yes, Brian. So Brian asked a question: theory, play versus game. If this is what I'm thinking of, where a game is just gaming like Pac-Man versus a game where they design it to make you feel an emotion. Actually, no. But your idea of designing emotion into the game is an interesting one. What I meant with the play versus game is you can there's a lot of things, like a lot of what happens in Grand Theft Auto and in The Sims is play. So there's a game embedded in Grand Theft Auto where you actually win the game, right? Like you complete sort of the big storyline and whatnot, and you win. That's sort of the success criteria. But there's all these other activities that you can do that are just fun to do, and so that is, you know, kind of the just sort of knowing that and designing for that, right? And yeah, so it's, well, to me, the meta game is what takes place outside, like it's above the game. That's sort of what meta means. So within the game, you have all this kind of just activity that you can do that's optional, and then you have this kind of games within this big game wrapper, right? And just kind of knowing what's the difference between just a playful activity and what's the actual game like. What are we asking the player to do? What are we just kind of offering for them to do? All of those kinds of things. Achievement systems, for instance, are a great way to kind of gamify a lot of these activities because it gives you like these little successes, right? Like running around in an MMO and killing chipmunks, and then you find out that when you kill 100 of them just because you like jumping up and stomping on them, and boom, you get this little achievement. You feel kind of, it's just kind of an interesting thing. And so I know that for me, looking at the designs, when I design games, I always try to have kind of a secondary optional thing, at least one optional thing that players can do, right? So even if you're playing a fairly linear game, to have like collectibles, kind of a little scavenger hunt going on that is totally not important to whether or not you finish the game or not, but it's just kind of a nice secondary thing to have as it's just kind of in there. And since you're already building a game world anyway, building that kind of thing is much less work than it would be to come up with a whole nother feature, you know, that currently really isn't supported with the game. So it's kind of a gamification. So Kelvin asks, achievements as a ranking system, could it work as a part of gamification? Gamification as a term applies to things that aren't like putting game stuff into things that normally are not games, like your mileage in your car could be gamified, so you're always trying to get, you know, the best mileage possible, or boy, I don't know, stuff like that, or like the things you get on the McDonald's soda cups, right? That there's like a little Monopoly game or something like that. That's gamifying getting fast food. So that kind of adds a little extra something to it. Whereas putting the achievements in is almost, it is kind of gamification of something that is, it's a gamification of an activity that's still inside your game. We're getting pretty theoretical and stuff, and we've sort of, I know I've sucked all the oxygen out of the air with my constant talking. So it's been an hour, and so if people need to go, that's cool. I would really love to see if you guys, before you go, if you could just say something about, like, did you think that this was useful? Was it too casual? Would you have preferred something more, more structured? I'll definitely be working on getting more experts in here to be part of the conversation. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So like the whole indie game thing too. I think that's like, definitely. I think that kind of Kickstarter. Let me just write that in there. Kickstarter indie.
Oh, that's my area of expertise.
Great. Well, guess what, Mister?
Uh-oh.
Send me an email, right? So, oh, you know what? Let me go ahead and I've got the contact stuff here. I'm gonna post that up in just a sec. All right. I think this is kind of a high level. I'm going to pop this open here, and so here's sort of this is my last slide. It's got sort of contact info on it. So the last bullet point here is sends questions, suggestions, and love letters to webinars@igda.org. If you want to be a panelist or presenter on any of these topics, please. Okay, great. Let me know. So, Stephen, I expect to hear from you.
Oh.
Great. And tell your friends if we had a calendar to which. So I think on the webinar webpage it should show what's coming up.
It does.
Okay, great. And I've got my desktop is kind of dedicated to this PowerPoint presentation right now, so I can't look at that. But this is good as these presentation topics I'm looking forward to next month. Okay, so great. Thanks, Adam. So we'll definitely try to have that there. It's the third Wednesday of every month. And for now, you guys are stuck with me unless somebody wants to do a Game of Thrones and ask me to step to one side. I'm here because I just want to really make this happen. I came up, I started in game design. There was no such thing as a game designer when I started a long time ago. I actually had to write my own job description every time I got promoted. So this has just been a real fun journey for me, and I've reached a point where I just really like talking to other designers and just kind of being as helpful as I possibly can. So that's kind of my thing. I hope to see everybody next month. I'm glad that we seem to have a good time here. Stephen, did you want to say anything?
Well, I can just see that there's so much to discuss, so many different topics, that eventually we're probably going to have to start finding ways to either have more webinars or more, it's like more than one each Wednesday or more than one a week, so that in order to be able to fit all this content, because there's just so much to discuss about, so much to talk about.
I agree. I think that there's two other attached topics that normally come under game design, which is story and level design, which I've done both of those, and now they're sort of branching out to become their own specialties. And so else this would take longer than a D&D game. That's hilarious. Kelvin writes, totally agree with Stephen, else this would take longer than a D&D game. Yes. I think that, I'm glad that you're enthusiastic about that. I know that Tom is is really keen on making these things happen. If there's more demand, we'll get more of these webinar windows opened. And frankly, I would love it if the game designers were the ones who are on fire and making this stuff happen. Oops, I just banged my microphone. So yeah, let's see what we can do, and you know, if there's a demand for it, go ahead and send. I hope you can read this blasted thing. It keeps coming up, you know, dark, or this, it keeps turning to this gray, even though I keep changing it. So it's webinars@igda.org. Just send an email there and say what. Just give us your thoughts on what you want it to be, and like I said, I'm going to go through the text of what everybody said about the topics, and we'll sort those out, and you know, look for a letter from Tristan about sort of like what we're going to be doing. I'll see if I can put it on the web page. It's not like a technical hurdle, but we'll see what we can do, and I should be able to list out like what the next couple of topics are going to be, and hopefully have some guest speakers on those also. So we'll see how that goes. Does anybody have anything they want to say before we sign off?
Well, I do want to thank you very much for making me a panelist all of a sudden here as a sort of an impromptu sort of thing. I was just planning on being a regular attendee, but I want to thank you very much for letting me get a chance to talk here.
You're very welcome, Stephen. And this is how the IGDA works, right? Like if you're willing to put energy into things, there's stuff to do. So this is kind of how I ended up at this end of the microphone also, is I was kind of an outspoken guy. And it's funny because Jason De La Rocca said, you know, you talk a lot at the meetings. Why don't you run for board of directors? Well, I guess I really should put my money where my mouth is. So I thought, you know, nobody's going to vote for me anyway. And then I ended up getting elected somehow. So you never know what's going to happen, right? Like it's just, this is such a fun industry to be in. We have such a great job. It's really great to get together and talk with other members of the tribe. So I'm looking forward to next month. I really enjoyed this. And, you know, send the letters in. Say, you know, give us your honest opinions. What could be better? What you liked? Topics you want to see, and please tell you know, tell more people about it. Get them to come in and join in, and that's, you know, that's how social media works. And this really is a social media. We're all here. We're all talking to each other. So sayonara, my friends. I'm really glad that you came, and I'm glad that you liked it. And we'll see you next month. Cheers.
Arrivederci.
Arrivederci, indeed. How do I... Thanks, guys. I'm trying to figure out how to turn this off. Let's see.